They say betrayal is a sharp wound, but for me, Arthur Caldwell, it was never anything more than a waiting game, a promise of compound interest. Patience is the only luxury that men in a hurry cannot afford. And Julian Cross, my son-in-law, has always been a man in a hurry. He didn't have the temperament for patience, that quality one acquires from watching the Boston tides rise and fall over 50 years of real estate deals and broken vows. He saw success as a straight line, while I had long learned it was a spiral and one could always wait for the moment the other's ascent became the pivot point for his fall. The incident occurred 6 months ago, but I replay it every night in the cold, perfect sharpness of a studio film. The contract was the Aries Project, a luxury development spanning an entire neighborhood in the Seaport District, the kind of deal that secures you a decade of tax comfort and etches your name onto a bronze plaque. It was my legacy, the one I had planned to divide into 3 shares, for my daughter Charlotte, for my grandson, and, I admit, a share for the promising young man who had married my daughter, Julian. He possessed that easy confidence, that smile people in our circle mistake for competence, a surface charm, a new varnish over cheap wood. He had managed to position himself as my trusted lieutenant, the one who accompanied me on sensitive site inspections, the one who held the blueprints. I recall a ring, a family heirloom I had given Charlotte on the day of their engagement, an old topaz. Julian had this habit of idly polishing it with his thumb, even when she wasn't wearing it, as if claiming its luster. My allergy is not a secret. It's a professional eccentricity. I suffer from an extremely rare anaphylactic reaction to methyl bromide, a compound sometimes found as a flame retardant in old industrial warehouses, especially those non-compliant since the 80s. This is why I personally avoid the initial inspections of brownfield sites. For the Aries Project update, however, there was this final due diligence meeting at the old maritime hangar on Pier 7, a last look, as they said. The day before the final signing, Julian made sure I was there. The room was cold, filled with the metallic scent of salt and dampness. Julian held the notebook beside me, ensuring my gaze was fixed on a feasibility chart. I remember the late afternoon sun filtering through the dusty window panes, illuminating the motes in the air, giving them a deceptive golden glow. The silence in that room was thick, broken only by the distant clang of a crane. That's when I felt the burn. A subtle sensation, first a prickling, then like my skin was absorbing crushed glass. It was faint, right on the edge of the perception, because the compound was diluted, just enough to act through prolonged contact and light inhalation, not enough to detect the chemical signature. I leaned down to read the final line of the report, and my hand inadvertently brushed the edge of the table. The surface was slightly wet, but not with water. I knew immediately. Julian, of course, was 3 steps away, his gray suit always immaculate, his face a mask of professional concentration. He didn't blink when I coughed, a dry cough that wasn't a cold. "Arthur, are you all right?" His voice was just loud enough to draw the attention of the associates talking at the other end of the room. There was a shade of false concern, like reciting a rehearsed line. "Just need some air," I murmured. It was already too late. The poison isn't in the snake, it's in the bite. My throat began to tighten, that terrifying sensation of closing like a muscle refusing to obey. I could feel my usual vetiver cologne mixing with the subtle chemical smell, an alliance of death and luxury. I grabbed my epinephrine injector, which I always keep in the inner pocket of my blazer. The snap, the pressure against my thigh, the instantaneous jolt of adrenaline spreading through my system. It was all familiar, but it wasn't the most painful part. The most painful part was seeing the shift in Julian's gaze. For a quarter of a second, a window opened. The concern vanished, replaced by a cold, raw satisfaction. It was there, beneath the veneer, the truth. He hadn't just waited for it to happen, he had orchestrated it. 10 minutes later, I was in an ambulance, on oxygen, my face swollen with edema. The signing of the Aries Project was postponed, then canceled. The competing firm, led by a man named Robert Finch, snatched the contract within 48 hours, citing the operational instability of Caldwell and Partners. I spent the following week in the hospital staring at the white ceiling of my private suite. Charlotte was by my side, worried, weeping. But Julian was omnipresent in the noise. He managed the crisis, he gave statements to the media, he reassured my clients. He played the perfect son-in-law, the designated successor, the rock. You know, I really thought he loved me. I had genuinely seen him as the future, the man capable of succeeding me without destroying what I had built. The wound wasn't the money lost, it was the blindness to which I had surrendered. When I returned home, I let everything settle. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I simply began to breathe more slowly. I did not confront him. To confront is to grant the other the dignity of a defense. It is to turn an execution into a trial, and I was in no mood for theater. I did what I do best. I watched, I listened, and I waited. My office on the 42nd floor of the financial district is a sanctuary of silence. The walls are covered in dark oak paneling, and the thick carpet absorbs every sound from the outside world. It was here that I began the work. The only thing that truly matters in this world is the foundation. I hired Miles, a former FBI agent I've known for decades, to focus on one thing: Julian Cross. Not his current finances, not potential mistresses, which would have been too easy and too vulgar, but his foundation. You don't build an empire on sand, and Julian had climbed too quickly for his base to be solid. The week I recovered, Charlotte organized a welcome-back dinner. The table was set in the formal dining room, beneath the Austrian crystal chandelier that reflected the light in 1,000 cold shards. Julian was there, more charming than ever, talking about how he had held the fort. "You never complained, Dad," Charlotte said, pouring me a glass of Chateau Margaux. "I thought you'd be furious about losing the Ares project." I took a sip, the rich, earthy taste of the Bordeaux spreading across my tongue. "Anger is a waste of resources, my dear. I am a businessman. I lost a contract. We move on, that is all." Julian smiled. That smile hurt me, not because of the betrayal, but because of his certainty of impunity. "Arthur is a rock, a true example to us all, Charlotte, calm under pressure." I raised my glass to him. "To instability. Without it, we would all be too comfortable, wouldn't we, Julian?" My son-in-law drank, his eyes gleaming, interpreting my toast as forgiveness. He didn't see the bite. He didn't understand that the calm was not acceptance, but concentration. For the next 6 months, I watched Julian flourish. He took over my operational responsibilities. He made waves. He signed a few minor contracts to prove his worth. He was winning the war for succession, slowly, patiently, aided by his adoring wife and his father-in-law, me, who seemed to have lost his edge. I watched him maneuver my partners, settle into my desk chair, breathing the air of my empire. Turns out karma has a sweet tooth, and I was here to serve him dessert. Miles's report arrived a month ago. It was bound in black leather, deceptively thin. The initial background check was clean, almost boring. But the foundations. Julian had lied about his foundations. I had always believed him when he spoke of his degree. An MBA from the Wharton School. He had it displayed on his wall, a framed document with the university seal and the ink watermark. He spoke of it with the casualness of a man with nothing to prove. He quoted professors, courses, anecdotes about life in Philadelphia. Miles had dug deep. He started with the obvious, the university registrar. The first response was a terse, "We cannot locate a Mr. Julian Cross in the graduating class of 2010, perhaps a spelling error." The second response, after providing the exact date of birth and social security number, was clearer, drier. Julian Cross was admitted, completed his first year with high marks, but disappeared from the registrar's office after the fall semester of his second year. No record of graduation or degree. He had dropped out. 2 years, a failure, a flight, perhaps a story of money or pressure, but he had returned with the framed paper, a carefully crafted forgery, a professional lie. In the world of high finance, lying about your degree is more than an ethical lapse. It is a fundamental weakness. It is saying, I am a fraudster out of necessity. I cannot succeed on my own. I placed the file in my safe. I didn't even share it with Miles. It was my secret, my gift. I left it there, like a very expensive wine waiting for the perfect year to be drunk. I could smell the scent of the fake diploma's yellowed paper even through the metal of the safe, an odor of pure vanity. Time passed, slow and glacial. The day of Julian's promotion ceremony finally loomed. He was being named Chief Operating Officer of Caldwell and Partners, a position custom-made for him by a tired board of directors eager for my retirement. Charlotte was ecstatic. She saw her husband becoming the boss. She saw her life crystallizing. She had ordered a bespoke gown. She spoke of their future holidays in Positano. I looked at my daughter. She was the only variable that made me hesitate, but I had decided that the truth, however brutal, was preferable to a foundation built on methyl bromide and glossy paper. The ceremony took place at the Boston Harbor Hotel in the grand ballroom overlooking the black water of the bay. The venue was bathed in a late November sunset light, gold and blood on the marble walls, but growing colder as the twilight set in. I donned my tailor-made black suit. I put on my Patek Philippe watch, the one I only wear for events that carry an eternal resonance. I looked at my reflection. The face was serene, but the eyes, I knew, betrayed the hunger. At the reception, everyone was there. Robert Finch, the man who had stolen the Ares project, was even there, offering me a cordial salute. The bankers, the lawyers, the board members, all awaited the consecration of the young wolf. Julian approached me, holding a glass of champagne. He was radiant, the sheen of triumph. "Arthur, I'm so glad you're here. Your presence means a lot." He spoke loudly for the people around to hear, playing the role of the grateful son-in-law. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, Julian." I took a glass. I looked at the champagne. It was of perfect quality, but it tasted bland to me. I prepared a little something, a gift, to mark the occasion. His smile became a little too broad. Money. He expected a check, shares, a public acknowledgement of my intent to cede the throne. "That's very generous. Thank you, Arthur." "Generosity is one of the great virtues, Julian." "Discretion is another," I replied, taking a sip. My tone was gentle, but the irony was there, concealed in the crystal. Charlotte joined me, squeezing my arm. She wore a subtle jasmine perfume, the same scent she wore on her prom night. "You look so proud, Dad. He deserves this. He's worked so hard." I patted her hand. "Yes, Charlotte. Hard work is often rewarded, or at least exposed." She laughed, not understanding. She didn't understand the mechanics of exposure. The master of ceremonies, the chairman of the board, a man named Mr. Harrington, took the stage. He spoke at length about the company's resilience, the vision of leadership, and the new energy Julian brought. Every word was a knife I willingly plunged into myself to sharpen the blade I was about to use. Then came the moment. Julian was called up. He ascended the stage to sustained applause. He shook Harrington's hand. He received an engraved glass plaque. He was at the apex. He was 35 and held the power. He took the microphone. His thanks were eloquent, polite, measured. He thanked Charlotte for her unwavering support. He thanked the partners for their faith. And then he turned to me, the spotlight bathing him in dramatic light. "And finally," Julian said, his voice rich and emotional, "to the man who taught me everything, my father-in-law, Arthur Caldwell. Arthur, you showed me what it means to be calm under the storm. After the loss of the Ares project, a personal disappointment for you, I saw a true leader. Your acceptance, your generosity in letting me take the reins, it's a lesson I will never forget. Thank you." People turned toward me. I stood up, a lone man in the dimmed light. I smiled, a genuine smile this time, because he had validated the waiting phase. He had believed his own lie about my acceptance. Harrington took the microphone again. And now I believe Charlotte's father, Arthur, has a little something to share. I made my way through the crowd. People patted my shoulder, looked at me with a mix of sympathy and condescension. Old Arthur is on his way out. I mounted the stage. The carpet was thick, a burgundy red that seemed to absorb the coming drama. The lights were warm, blinding. Julian stood beside me, beaming. I could smell his cologne, a mixture of sandalwood and ambition. I took the microphone. I let a long silence settle, a silence that seemed to swallow the noise of the 150 people present. "Good evening," I began, my voice calm, low, forced to project by habit. "This is a great honor. My son-in-law, Julian, just spoke of my generosity. And he is right. When betrayed, one has two choices: bitterness or the generosity to offer the other the opportunity to pay." My tone was too philosophical for the setting. The smiles in the audience flickered. Julian sensed the change in the air. His face lost a fraction of its sheen, as if the brightness of a screen had been lowered. "Arthur," he murmured, reaching out for my arm. I stepped back, breaking contact. He mentioned a disappointment, the loss of the Ares project. He neglected to mention that this loss occurred because my exposure to methyl bromide was not an accident, but a deliberate act calculated to remove me from the signing table. A table where Julian could position himself as my replacement. A murmur ran through the hall. Harrington went pale. Charlotte, in the front row, put her hand over her mouth, eyes wide. Julian, frozen, the betrayal reflected in his eyes. I saw the fear, cold and sudden. "These are ridiculous accusations, Arthur. Under stress." He tried, regain control, to appeal for sympathy. I raised a hand, the gesture of a conductor. "I assure you my lucidity has never been better, but that is not the gift. The gift is not the past, but the foundation of the future." I placed the microphone on the stand and pulled a leather portfolio from my blazer. I opened it. Inside, two sheets. One, Julian's fake diploma, which I had subtly lifted from his wall earlier in the day and replaced with a slightly lower quality printed copy. He hadn't noticed. The other, a document from the registrar of the Wharton School, signed and authenticated. I said nothing. I simply handed the first sheet to Harrington, then the second. Harrington, confused, looked at the two documents. His gaze navigated between the diploma parchment, magnificent, and the terse official letter. The truth is often less dramatic than the lie, but far more devastating. I took the microphone again. "Julian told you he had an MBA from Wharton. He told my daughter, he told the banks, he put it on his CV. He is an ambitious businessman, but the truth is he never obtained that degree. He dropped out midway through his second year." Julian's voice cracked. "This is slander, a desperate attempt by an old man." He turned to the crowd, seeking allies who were no longer there. He saw only judges. I ignored his panic, my gaze fixed on the middle of the room. "My gift tonight is not money. It is the proof. The first page, which Mr. Harrington holds, is a meticulous forgery. The second is the confirmation from the university registrar, proof that Mr. Cross's entire ascent from the very beginning is based on a crime, a fraud. The fundamental pillar of his credibility is non-existent." The silence. It was not a murmur. It was the total absence of sound, an intake of air by 150 pairs of lungs. Time had frozen. The warm lights now illuminated the sweat beading on Julian's forehead. The chandelier, so elegant, transformed him into a trembling statue. "I didn't need to attack his contract," I said, turning slightly toward my son-in-law, my face remaining cold and smooth. "I needed to attack his identity. A contract can be lost, but a career built on a falsehood is a house of cards waiting for a breath." Harrington, understanding the legal implication and the relational disaster, discreetly folded the documents, his face ashen. He didn't even look at Julian. A businessman's gaze is always fixed on the risk, never on the pain. I stepped away from the microphone. Charlotte was in tears. Her husband, the hero, the Rock, was now a naked man exposed on the stage. He couldn't meet my eyes. He was looking at the exit, already planning his escape. I descended from the stage. I walked to my daughter. I took her in my arms. She was shaking. "Why, Dad?" she sobbed. Her jasmine scent was now mixed with the bitterness of disaster. "Because people who use another's weakness to advance deserve neither your love nor my trust. A man who truly loves, you would never have built your life on a lie." I left her with a friend and walked out. I didn't need to see the rest. The fall is always quicker than the ascent, and the sound of the fall is always the same. I stepped out into the cold Boston air. The bay was black. The city shone, oblivious to the small drama that had just unfolded. I took a cab. I looked at my watch. It was 8:42 p.m. The waiting was over. I thought of the glass plaque Julian had held minutes earlier, the seal of his ephemeral power. I thought of the Ares contract, lost. It wasn't revenge for the money. It was for the privilege of using my weakness, my body, my life as a tool. Diplomas can be forged, but the price of truth is always paid in cash in broad daylight. If stories like this linger with you, stay. There's always another secret waiting to be told. Subscribe and let's uncover them, one confession at a time.